Oded Grajew evolved from young toy manufacturer to Brazil's leading advocate for corporate social responsibility.
The business sector is the most powerful sector in society. Of the 100 greatest economies in the world, 51 are businesses.
He founded the Abrinque Foundation, which made great inroads against the practice of child labor, and Instituto Ethos for Business Social Responsibility, an organization that has engaged more than 1,000 companies, representing 1/3 of Brazil's gross domestic product, to adopt socially responsible practices.
Social responsibility is nothing more and nothing less than doing the right things. And when you do the right things, the personal advantages are enormous. And on the other hand, we show the risks of not having socially responsible management.
Oded Grajew has made a career of bridging divides between conservative and progressive, labor and business, public and private. In this program, he shares his methods of enlisting everyone in the effort to build a sustainable society.
If we must talk about global affairs, world affairs, we must, before anything else, know that we are living in times never before lived by mankind. Never before in all the history of mankind have we had to face, as we are facing now, the possibility of the end of the human species. And that's without talking about the social conditions mankind faces today, where more than half the population lives in poverty, where the distance between rich and poor increases more and more. The distance between the 20% richest people of the planet and the 20% poorest, which was 30 times in the 60s in the last century, now approaches 100 times. This is without mentioning the distance between rich and poor countries, and the distance between rich and poor in the rich countries. This situation is unsustainable, because social injustice, the difference between rich and poor, is a fantastic field for all conflicts. Another important fact is that forecasts show that access to weapons of mass destruction by people is just a matter of time. So conflicts that today are limited in terms of weaponry may become devastating conflicts. What is the responsibility of the business sector? The business sector is the most powerful sector in society. Of the 100 greatest economies in the world, 51 are businesses. The media, television, radio, newspapers, in all the world are basically in the hands of the private sector. I don't need to tell anyone who is listening to us about the great power of the means of communications today, the power of influencing people, of influencing behavior, the power of choosing priorities in society. The private sector also has great political, electoral power. No one is unaware of the power of the private sector in election. So, clearly, the situation we have today in the world, the situation of great disparity between rich and poor, a great environmental threat to the human species, clearly, those with so much power bear much responsibility for the world we have today. But at the same time, there is another opportunity we have. Those with so much power, those with so much responsibility for making the world what it is today, hold also the great possibility, I would say more, have the great responsibility of changing this state of things. To remove the risks we have today from the social perspective, the environmental perspective. And the private sector has this great opportunity, this great responsibility of ensuring for us all a better future. This is why it is so important for the private sector to be engaged in a discussion in a self-criticism of its role in today's society and in a great discussion of responsibility in the future of mankind. I and 3 other friends started a toy company in Brazil. And as a business person, I always tried to do my best with my employees, with my clients, in the way I ran the business, because I believed it was a right thing to do, and also because I knew it would be beneficial to my business, because I would have motivated, dedicated employees. I would have support from clients, support from society. So I always tried to do things in a right way, intuitively, without a great notion of this social responsibility movement. I also began to attend the meetings of the Association of Toy Businesses. And I always had some ideas on how toy businesses should behave, to change their relationship with employees, get involved in the community. I always had some ideas. But people would tell me they were good ideas, correct ideas, but they weren't practical ideas. The president of the association, who had been president for many years, decided to step down, and to my surprise, they suggested my name for president. I did not expect that, nor was I thinking about it, but I decided to accept, just to prove to myself and to others whether those ideas could be applied in practice. If I was just a dreamer, a person without a sense of reality, or if my ideas could work. And I began to get involved with the businesses of the sector. And I was always bothered by the discussions because they were very out-of-date discussions. The environment was deemed a movement of a few dreamers, a few hippies, against capitalism, against the businesses. Social issues were not considered. Brazil was still under a military dictatorship, so there wasn't a democratic perspective, a more advanced business perspective. And I and some other presidents of business entities, a very few, we decided to create a different movement. A new business movement that showed that not all business people thought that way, where business people were concerned with democracy, with human rights, with the environment, with more civilized relations between businesses, business people, and workers. It was not called social responsibility, but it really was a vision of social responsibility. And we created a new movement called Corporate-Based National Ideology. It was launched in 1987. I was the first general coordinator of this movement. It was a path that led me little by little to become engaged politically, socially, with the new emerging business movements here in Brazil. As president of a business association, as president of a Brinque, the Brazilian Association of Toy Businesses, I always thought of doing different things, much more than what is traditionally done, which is protecting the interests of toy businesses. And thinking of a priority we could choose, I have always thought of children. The future of any person, of any family, of any society, of any community, of any country, will always depend on the treatment it gives to the children, because they are the future, and they will be the result of what society gives to them. I had this idea, began to explore if it was feasible. I talked to a representative from UNICEF here in Brazil. I gathered the toy businesses, there are 400 toy businesses, I called in UNICEF and asked them to show the situation of children in Brazil. The situation of children in Brazil, including when compared to the situation of children in other countries. And when we finished the presentation, I asked if Brazil had any future, if our country had any future with the children in this situation. And evidently, the answer was no. And he said it was important for each one to think about what to do and that we should get involved. And I presented the idea of creating another entity, the Grajew Foundation for the Rights of Children. And they agreed. We began to work. Well, I could take a long time explaining everything the Grajew Foundation does, but maybe I can cite a few examples. One example is that we put the struggle against child labor on the Brazilian agenda, engaging businesses in Brazil to combat child labor. Not just the businesses, but throughout the entire production chain. In the past few years, we had a 40% decrease in the number of children working. The estimate earlier was around 3 million children working, and now we have fewer than 2 million children working here in Brazil, and we continue this work against child labor. We are working with around 1,000 municipalities here in Brazil, 1,000 mayors who are engaged in commitments to children within their administrations, commitments to reduce school dropouts, to reduce child mortality. Today, we have programs to set up libraries in hospitals, libraries in social assistance institutions. We have a child adoption program that involves around 150 organizations and benefits around 50,000 children. With all our programs, we directly involve around 1 million children. And the Child-Friendly Business Program, in which businesses undertake 10 commitments regarding children, regarding mothers, not just against child labor, but in the issue of serving mothers, in maternal health, prenatal exams, daycare centers in the workplace. In short, there are several programs that, today, are benchmarks in Brazil, not only for public policy, but also for businesses' engagement with children. In 1997, I and my wife Mara decided to take a sabbatical, a year of learning, traveling, of doing nothing. For half of the year, we were in Europe, the other half in the United States. At the end of this year, when I had met many people, I met business people, organizations that address social issues with business people, an idea came to create in Brazil Instituto Ethos for Business and Social Responsibility. In fact, practically all the initiatives I've taken that have resulted in creating new endeavors, new organizations, happened at times of doing absolutely nothing. One of the great risks today with the issue of stress, with people not having time for themselves, with their full schedules, is that they don't leave room in their minds. They don't leave room for their imagination, for their creativity, for anything new to happen. It is essential for anyone who really wants to undertake new things and think about the meaning of things to leave room in their time, in their schedule, so that new things can come. And this is how Instituto Ethos began. When I arrived in Brazil after this sabbatical, I called a meeting with some business people who had an advanced social consciousness, presented the idea of Instituto Ethos. We set up the first group of directors, 15 directors that represented 11 businesses. And with these 11 businesses and 15 directors, we established the Instituto Ethos of Business and Social Responsibility here in Brazil. For 3 months, we discussed the mission of Instituto Ethos, and our mission is to promote corporate social responsibility so that businesses will have socially responsible management and will be partners in building a society that is more just, sustainable, and prosperous. They will be partners in building sustainable development. This mission is very important because it shows what is needed to be done by business and what the purpose of social responsibility really is. That is not just to make businesses socially responsible, but to make them partners in building a sustainable society. Our international relationships were important for the creation of Instituto Ethos. Our first inspiration was BSR, Business for Social Responsibility in the United States, which oriented us on how to begin, how to start Instituto Ethos, and supplied us with material and publications, such as The First Steps to Social Responsibility. And the support that Bob Dan and BSR gave us since the beginning of Instituto Ethos was very, very important for Instituto Ethos to become the important entity that it is today in Brazil. Instituto Ethos has around 953 members. They are small, medium, and large companies of several sectors in all of Brazil, representing approximately 33% of the Brazilian GDP, the Brazilian gross domestic product. They employ approximately 2 million people. They are national and also multinational companies. There is a great diversity of companies at the Instituto Ethos. In addition to inducing companies to have socially responsible management, in our mission, we also have the need to engage businesses in building a sustainable society. For that, we choose the parameters of the Millennium Development Goals. For example, a company that decides to set limits for consumption of energy and natural resources within the company, of water, of electricity, of products that are not biodegradable, and all the savings the company makes with its employees are directed to a social project that doesn't stay with the company. This social project is decided upon by the employees, where to invest in the community, what kind of action, how the employees can participate. So we have a great program today engaging businesses in building, for instance, libraries in cities in Brazil that don't have libraries. We will reduce the number of cities without libraries in Brazil to 0. We have a great program of setting up food banks in all the states of Brazil. We have a great program for companies to offer youths their first job, their first working opportunity. A great program for businesses to combat illiteracy in Brazil. Another program is for companies to be open to apprentices, young apprentices who can have an income, study, and learn a profession within companies. Businesses are becoming schools for work education. We also have a great program engaging companies to combat slave labor in Brazil. Bad working conditions, inhumane working conditions. Another partnership is between the Federation of Banks in Brazil with 700 social organizations that work in the poorest sections of Brazil to build cisterns, a system that captures rainwater that falls from rooftops And the family that spends 5 or 6 hours a day in search of water, usually contaminated water, now has clean, potable water within their homes. That is another example of partnerships between businesses and social movements. We used, I can say, a double strategy. First, showing the advantages of social responsibility for business people and their businesses. And this advantage is built on 2 pillars. First, the ethical advantage. The advantage of doing the right things, because social responsibility is nothing more and nothing less than doing the right things. And when you do the right things, the personal advantages are enormous. Because people feel good. They feel self-value. They know they're doing the right thing. And the second advantage for the business is because a company depends on people. And if the company treats people well, they also treat the company well. So it's an opportunity to have talents in your company, to have people engaged and committed, to have support from the community, support from consumers. In short, all the competitive advantages for a business. And on the other hand, we show the risks of not having socially responsible management, which can mean rejection by consumers. It can mean a very bad image for the company. It can mean social and environmental liabilities that can destroy a company. So we mix the will, the hope to be socially responsible with the fear of not being socially responsible. So we built this great program with consumers, where we encourage consumers to favor companies that are more socially responsible. We have a great program with the media that values socially responsible businesses while exposing problems that are not socially responsible. We have a program with investors to invest in socially responsible businesses. We have a great program with universities so that they include social responsibility in their curricula and for their professionals to graduate with a culture of social responsibility. We have a great program with non-governmental entities, with NGOs, in the defense of human rights, so that they will value social responsibility in businesses and condemn companies that are not socially responsible. We have partnerships with banks, with insurance companies, to favor socially responsible businesses in terms of rates and loans. We have programs with the government to include social responsibility as a criterion in public bids. In short, we use many inducers to mobilize businesses to be more socially responsible. And also, the companies that are more socially responsible are benchmarks for others to advance in their socially responsible management. We also never stopped addressing the ethical issue in social responsibility. We never let only the pragmatic issues be the motivators of social responsibility. Because businesses are created by people. People, human beings, seek meaning for their lives. They seek meaning for their work. Most people who work in companies today don't find meaning in their work, just a means of survival. There is an enormous spiritual and ethical vacuum today in people, and social responsibility provides an opportunity for people to give meaning to their lives. And the appeal of meaningful work is a very strong direction for engaging people. Each one of us as a consumer can change the world, because it is consumers who support businesses, and it is businesses that have great power and great responsibility for the world we have today, and for the world we'll have tomorrow.
No momento que os consumidores resolverem
When consumers decide to buy products and services only from businesses that are socially responsible, we can change the world.
há muitos casos
There are many cases that show that when consumers decide to boycott a company
boicotar uma empresa
because the company uses child labor, because it harms the environment, because it is involved in corruption, these consumers can change the companies.
aqui no Brasil nós
Here in Brazil, we set up a program called the Child Friendly Business Program. These are companies that don't use child labor, including throughout their chain of production.
e nós fizemos uma grande campanha para os consumidores
We had a great campaign for consumers, telling consumers, when buying products and services, buy them from companies that treat children well. Buy from child-friendly businesses.
milhares de empresas se engajaram
Thousands of businesses became engaged in the Child-Friendly Business Program, using the Child-Friendly Business Seal, because they felt a favorable consumer reaction to these businesses.
e este foi, por exemplo, dos motivos que
And that was, for instance, one of the reasons that made child labor in Brazil go down around 40% in the last few years, because businesses began to be concerned with these issues.
aqui no Brasil nós estamos agora desenvolvendo
Here in Brazil, we are now developing tools for consumers to perceive which are the most socially responsible businesses,
porque as pesquisas indicam que aproximadamente 80%
because research indicates that approximately 80% of consumers want to favor socially responsible companies,
15% dos
but only 15% of consumers act upon it.
E o que a pesquisa mostra é que os consumidores
And what the
querem
research shows is that consumers want to have tools. They want something that can allow them, when buying products and services, to choose between socially responsible companies and companies that are not socially responsible.
Para que se tenha uma coerência entre a vontade e a ação, nós
So in
vamos
order for their will to be consistent with their actions, we will launch a series of information tools
para que eles possam ter na mão
for
dados
consumers to have more information at hand to choose companies according to their degree of social responsibility.
a responsabilidade social empresarial.
Corporate social responsibility doesn't work without indicators, without measuring instruments.
Nós não podemos agir sobre
We cannot act on anything that cannot be measured.
nesse sentido.
For that purpose, we developed the ethos indicators of social responsibility,
Mostram como a empresa está
which shows how the company is doing with regard to the issue of transparency and values, with regards to its employees, with regards to its consumers, with regards to its suppliers, with regard to the environment, with regard to the ethical issue, for example, the issue of corruption, its relationship with the government, its relationship with society. They are measuring instruments that show how the company is doing with regard to all these segments of the public and all these issues.
são indicadores de
There are three types of indicators. First, what we call binary indicators. Indicators of yes or no that show if a company does or does not have a certain
Por
policy.
exemplo, a empresa tem uma política para
For example, does the company have a policy for supporting people with disabilities? Yes or no? Does the company have a code of ethics? Yes or no?
A empresa tem
Does the company have a policy for its relationship with, for investing in the community? Yes or no? Does the company use social responsibility criteria in selecting suppliers? Yes or no?
outra categoria de indicadores são
Another
indicadores de
category of
processo,
indicators
que mostram
is process indicators that show the progress of the socially responsible process with regard to each of these areas. For example, in the code of ethics issue,
a empresa tem código de ética que foi
does the
elaborado
company have a code of ethics that was prepared only by the president and hangs on the wall?
ou esse código de ética foi
Or was
elaborado
this code of ethics also prepared with employees and non-government parties?
ou se o código de ética
Or does this code of ethics also get an annual review?
por exemplo, na questão de
For example,
investimento na sociedade,
in the community investment issue,
se a empresa
does the
mede o
company
resultado,
measure the result of that investment?
se tem a participação
Does it involve
de
partners,
entidades,
entities from the community?
se faz parceria
Whether it has
com outras,
partnerships with other companies? whether it also involves local government with this social program, what degree of depth this process has reached. And another group of indicators are numerical indicators. For example, the number of women in managerial positions, the distance between the largest and the smallest salary in the company, the percentage of community investment with regard to revenue, the number of people with disabilities with regard to the total number of employees. So there are three types of indicators that show first how the company is doing. It is a sort of checkup for the company on its degree of social responsibility, and also provides instruments to plan the company's progress in social responsibility. The company can say, in the binary indicators, this year I have 20 no's. I want to have only 10 no's. Or in my degree of progress in the process indicators, I can make advances in several. Or in the numerical indicators, I can improve these figures throughout the next year. So it becomes a planning instrument, with goals for each year of progress in the degree of social responsibility. We really encourage companies, but we can't make them publish their social report. We encourage businesses to publish information on their website on their degree of social responsibility. Companies are interested in showing these indicators because they want to get consumer preference. They are already required to show them to the pension funds and to investors because that is a condition to receive financing. And they are also required to show them to the government when they take part in public bids. So we use a series of mechanisms that make companies reveal their information and progress in their degree of social responsibility. That is the strategy we use. Instituto Ethos works with several segments of society and several partners, and our international work is also very important because our participation on the international level also reflects on our work here in Brazil. We actively took part in building a network in the Americas called Empresa, which gathers business entities that work with social responsibility in several countries in the Americas. We were able to help promote the establishment of new entities here in Latin America, in Argentina, in Mexico, in Paraguay, in Uruguay, in Colombia, in Peru, that promote social responsibility in their countries. We have actively taken part since the beginning in the Global Compact, bringing Brazilian companies to sign on to the Global Compact commitments. I personally am part of the Global Compact's International Advisory Board. And here in Brazil, we were pioneers in saying to companies, if you want to be part of the Global Compact, you are required to show each year, based on social responsibility indicators, how you are doing with regard to the Global Compact principles. This hasn't happened in any other place in the world. And here in Brazil, we also prepared a publication with the indicators, showing how the companies are doing with regard to the Millennium Development Goals that were established by the UN. And together with other companies, we established a week here in Brazil, a national week each year in August, a week for mobilizing citizenship and solidarity. And in this week, we have a great campaign for the Millennium Development Goals, and there is an evaluation, debates, initiatives, all directed toward the Millennium Development Goals, and a great advertising campaign that is now being adopted by several other countries explaining the Millennium Development Goals. A campaign that involves visual symbols that makes the Millennium Development Goals understandable to the greater public. This is one of the several initiatives we have taken in the international field.
suporte do Instituto Ethos,
The support of Instituto Ethos is basically the support of businesses.
950,
Since we have 950 member companies, we never depend on a single one, the support of a single one.
temos sempre uma...
We always have great diversification in our support from businesses.
As empresas sabem também que
Businesses know we will always defend the mission of social responsibility
que não haverá conflito.
and that there will be no conflict of interest with a business that supports us.
Por exemplo,
For instance, if a problem arises with the company regarding its management,
porque nós trabalhamos com muitos indutores.
because we work with several producers. We work with unions, with non-governmental entities, with NGOs for protection of rights.
Nós também trabalhamos muito com a mídia.
We also work a lot with the media.
Esses grupos fazem...
And what these groups do does not depend on us. The company knows there will be a lot of people watching and exposing it when, for instance, it uses misleading advertising, or when the business wants to take advantage and fool the public. And it knows that we at Instituto Ethos, we will always encourage journalists, the media, the unions, the social and union organizations, on one hand, to praise and favor businesses when it's appropriate, but also to expose cases when businesses want to fool the public with a given action. There is nothing worse for Instituto Ethos, for the social responsibility movement, than loss of credibility. So it is extremely important that we struggle to maintain credibility in the social responsibility movement. No company that affiliates itself with Instituto Ethos today believes that with this affiliation it can hide any type of inappropriate conduct. This is part of our mission, of our work. And this has allowed Instituto Ethos to acquire great credibility with society, and it has made many companies want to become members and to be part of the social responsibility movement.
Quando se fala do poder das empresas,
When talking about the power of corporations, I always like to give an example.
que é o exemplo
An example of things that are or aren't important today for society, of the priority that society gives to certain things,
e do poder que o
and of the power of the business sector. For example, the business sector holds communications, radio, television, and newspapers.
Então, por exemplo, todos ouviram falar e sabem que
So, for example, everyone has heard that about 3,000 people were killed barbarously in the World Trade Center in New York.
mas ao mesmo tempo eu tenho certeza
But at the same time, I'm sure many people don't know that every day, yesterday, today, tomorrow, for example,
morrem
25,000 children below the age of 5
vitimados
die from hunger, from poverty, from disease. So imagine, for example, if the private sector,
as empresas
the businesses that advertise, that support and fund programs, decided to say every day how many children died on the day before from poverty and hunger.
então imediatamente
So immediately, I think people will say, this situation can't go on. Let us end hunger and poverty.
e acabar com a
And ending poverty and hunger in the world,
acabar com
preventing children from dying,
custa muito menos.
costs a lot less than the wars that are fought today in the world.
Então isso é exemplo.
So this is an example of things that are or aren't a priority, and of the possibilities for the private sector to elect the right priorities, and to mobilize world society to end the ailments that exist today in the world.
Porque nós todos sabemos
Because we all know what to do to end poverty, misery, to promote sustainable development. Mankind knows what needs to be done.
a humanidade hoje também tem todo
Mankind today also has all the necessary resources to do what must be done.
Então é questão de vontade.
So it is a question of political will and priority. The resources are there. For example, today we spend $900 billion a year on military expenses and $300 billion a year in agricultural subsidies. And mankind cannot gather $50 billion more to reach the Millennium Development Goals that were established by the countries and the UN. And all agree that this represents very little compared to the resources that exist today in society. So the private sector has great responsibility for other priorities to be placed in all of society. When I talk to a business person, I think that the most important thing a business person can do to progress in corporate social responsibility is to publicly acknowledge the political decision of advancing in the process of social responsibility, because it is a permanent process that begins but never ends. So the most important decision, the most important thing when I talk to a business person about commitment is the political decision of implementing social responsibility in his company. And the first step is to establish a code of ethics, principles, and values that he believes are the guidelines of his actions. When deciding anything in the company, and a company decides on a lot every day, the principles and values must always be looked at, and the decision only taken forward when it fits in with the company's principles and values. In the case of social activists, of non-government organizations, I, in my conversation, first show that social responsibility is not just for businesses. Social responsibility is for everyone. For each one of us personally, so that we can choose between several ways to do things, and that it is always important to find the ethical way to do things, that our responsibility begins with our individual actions, that any social organization has employees, deals with suppliers, deals with the environment, with the government, and that the first thing, the most important thing to do, is to direct your buying based on social responsibility criteria. And to the government, I also say that it is important to implement socially responsible management in government, that the government must also elect its priorities. Because the government has budgets, it has resources, and it must also guide its actions by social responsibility criteria. And it should choose companies to be government suppliers, or choose companies that deserve government investment based on social responsibility. And that will be, and it is, a great driving motor for corporate social responsibility. Whenever anyone says that the problem is too big to be solved by each one of us, that he feels too small and weak to change the world, I always say, it doesn't matter if you will be able to do those things, if they will have any consequence on the world. It is important that you do your part. It is important that you do everything that must be done in your beliefs. Because everything you do will reflect on future generations and will reflect on your children. And it's awful if one day your child should come to you and say, "You knew the world was in danger. You knew the environment was being destroyed. You knew about social conditions. And why didn't you do your part?" So it is very important to build an honorable life, a dignified life, and try to do things. Because one day you will have to evaluate your life, and when you have a positive balance, there is no better gratification for a person.
success as a Brazilian toy manufacturer led Oded Grajew to launch a nationwide campaign to end child labor. He has since become one of the world's leading advocates for corporate social responsibility and a champion of people's ability to create change.
We must not forget that power today is concentrated in governments and a great deal in businesses. Now, governments and businesses depend on people.
In 2001, Grajew founded the World Social Forum, an annual gathering of more than 150,000 of the world's leading citizen groups who work together to address some of the world's most pressing issues.
The World Social Forum is not just an event, an occurrence, nor is it an organization. It is a process. It is a process of forming ideas of another society, another world.
In this program, he describes how the World Social Forum has grown and generated hundreds more gatherings worldwide, each expanding this powerful new model for social action. He offers his experience on how to stimulate systemic change in the way we live, work, and govern.
The World Social Forum has great potential to save mankind from the great social and environmental disaster that is on our threshold. If we believe all the forecasts from scientists, universities, the United Nations, and social organizations, we can indeed move towards sustainable development, to a world of peace, solidarity, and environmental preservation. This is the most optimistic outlook. Often, human beings, people, organizations, and countries act after great disasters. After the disaster, we begin to think, well, let's change our lives. Many people in hospitals decide to quit smoking. Many people decide after their child leaves home to have a better relationship with their children. Many businessmen, after great problems, decide to change company management. In the case of mankind, if the disaster happens, there won't be actions afterwards, because the disaster is a disaster of enormous magnitude. The great challenge, the great risk of the World Social Forum movement is for it to become a movement and a process already known and traditional in the other world, this current world that we already know, and not to be the movement of another transforming world. This is a great risk that exists for any social organization, any social entity that intends to be a transforming entity. Social organizations, the great transforming social entities, are always created by a small group, usually very idealistic, very bold, very creative, that manages to build a transforming organization. Often that organization begins to gain recognition, to grow. And the great risk is for the energy that was directed toward that mission to begin little by little to turn to the actual organization. The question is no longer what is good for achieving that mission, but what is good for the welfare of that organization. The organization becomes an end in itself, and the mission ends up being more and more forgotten. Another great risk is to transform the energy that was directed toward the mission into energy for the political struggle to control the organization. Another great risk is when the organization grows and is acknowledged. Doors begin to open. There is more space and recognition, which makes the organization become more and more conservative, more like the establishment, because it doesn't want to lose its recognition. It loses courage, avoids conflict, does not want to displease anyone, and ends up being more a conservative than a transforming organization. They are risks that involve not only the World Social Forum, but, I think, any social organization that has the idea and the mission to be transforming and improve the world.
Ashoka, Innovators for the Public, is a global organization that searches out and supports social entrepreneurs, men and women who use entrepreneurial vision and skills to attack and solve social problems.
We're only talking about people who cannot come to rest until their vision has become the new pattern society-wide.
Ashoka is a community of over 1,500 social entrepreneurs, plus staff members, partners, and volunteers in over 50 countries who work together to create widespread, long-lasting change. Bill Drayton is its founder.
You've got to have a vision that's going to change the field. You've got to be equally concerned with the how-tos. How do you get from here to there?
In this program, Bill Drayton describes how social entrepreneurs think and act, how the burgeoning field of social entrepreneurship is making a profound impact on millions of lives, and how everyone can contribute to its growth.
The entrepreneur and the idea are so closely tied together that the life cycle of an idea and the entrepreneur is very hard to separate. Now, of course, an entrepreneur can live beyond the launch of an idea. Similarly, the idea can live long after the entrepreneur. Jean Monnet, I think, was the second most brilliant person of the last century. He was responsible for the unification of Europe. His basic dynamic in Europe, idea, institution, stronger idea, next institution, more momentum and credibility for the idea. He died in 1979. That dynamic is still going on. And that's his core genius, in my mind, is setting that dynamic in place. So the person and the idea are married, but especially once you get beyond this stage of defining and figuring out how to make it work at scale, then they can have independent lives. One of the Ashoka Fellows in Brazil saw that half the people in a relatively rich state, Rio Grande do Sul, had no electricity in the rural areas. He wanted to change that. So he developed a new approach to rural electrification that cut the cost 70 to 90%. And then he went to work to change it. And he had to talk to the engineering firms and get financing structured and so on. That's changed the lives of way over 1 million people and spreading. He's now focusing on how do you get solar energy into the hands of people who are not wealthy. And there are hundreds of millions of people across the world who can benefit from that. J.B. Schramm, right here in Washington, was one of the first U.S. Ashoka Fellows. He has a very simple idea, but one that will have a big impact. He went to college. Most of his classmates didn't. That bothered him because he knew that they were just as smart, and he thought this was wrong, a big waste. He had parents who went to college. They didn't. This is not what should make the difference. Classic for an entrepreneur, he kept that idea in his mind's eye. He kept thinking about it, looking at it, feeling his way to an answer. He had to find an answer that would be low cost and simple and a big win for all the actors. Classic entrepreneur's criteria. He set up something called College Summit. The way it works, he takes a peer group of high school students from families that do not have college backgrounds, and they spend 4 or 5 days at a college summit on a nearby campus. College is demystified. They're challenged from the first moment to think about their lives, to articulate the strengths of what they've done, to write the essays for getting into college. They're talking with people who are role models. He then works with the homeroom teachers. Now, this works. 80% of the kids go, 80% graduate. And this is a very simple idea, but it has to be implemented. And he's now at the stage of moving it out across the country. That's a social entrepreneur at work.
Transparency International is a citizen-based organization that creates tools, coalitions, and campaigns to fight corruption locally, nationally, and globally.
In some countries, whole generations of young people are being lost because their parents cannot afford the bribes which are being demanded.
Transparency International has pioneered the worldwide creation of legal frameworks to combat corruption and works tirelessly with global partners and more than 90 national chapters to enforce them. Peter Eigen is its creator.
What has happened during the last 5 years is breathtaking. So in a way we have a window of opportunity of a couple of years.
In this program, Peter Eigen describes the terrible toll that corruption takes in the lives of millions of people, how social, political, and legal breakthroughs offer great hope of neutralizing it, and how everyone can join the growing campaign to eliminate one of humanity's greatest injustices.
Of course, a precondition of having an energetic fight against corruption is that there is a awareness among the people, among the decision makers, that corruption is extremely dangerous and that something has to be done about it. And one of our most important tools in this area has been the global index which we produce every year, the Corruption Perception Index. This is an index in which we rank countries by the perception of thousands of people who are being questioned by independent opinion surveys, last year by 17 independent surveys, about their perception of how important corruption is in a given country. This list has become a major tool. In fact, it is expected with some anxiety by some countries and is always put on the front page of many important media and has been like a miraculous tool to put our agenda on center stage in the world. We have been criticized that this is somewhat one-sided. In particular, Prime Minister Mahathir of Malaysia criticized us that this looks only at the perceived corruption by the recipients of bribes, and that therefore naturally the third world looks worse than basically the hand that gives and offers the bribes. And I think he is right. This was indeed a bias which is built in the Corruption Perception Index, but we had no data on the perceived corruption of the companies coming from various countries in the exporting world. And therefore we had to develop our own survey, and we have done this, and that is our Bribe Payers Index. It was a very revealing instrument, which by the way also ranked various sectors in accordance with their perceived vulnerability to bribery, where the construction sector is the worst, arms trade and arms and military supplies is the second, then comes the energy sector. It's sort of instinctively the right order, and has helped us to deal with some of the issues in these sectors more effectively. There has been a criticism that if we only measure perceptions, it is a rather impressionistic, subjective criterion which may be very unfair. It is practically impossible to prove corruption cases, and therefore it is futile to try to simply measure actual corruption, proven corruption. Therefore we simply had to take a proxy for this, and that proxy is what educated people, what victims of corruption, what participants in corrupt deals, what they perceive to be the corruption in a given situation. And we found that this is an extremely important proxy which helped us to paint an image of the reality. Perceptions are very important, but because of the weaknesses we have also begun to apply some other methods, in particular in surveys which are done within countries. So we had surveys within Mexico, within Peru, within Kenya, for instance, a household survey is asking people how much money does your family have to pay every year for bribes. How often are you asked for a bribe? Did you pay bribes yourself? And so on. And based on these surveys, we have started a new tool which we call the corruption barometer, which this year has quite a number of countries listed. So building awareness is a tremendously important starting point for fighting corruption. And that awareness, of course, has tremendously changed in the last, I would say, 5 years.
Mohammed Yunus is the founder of Grameen Bank. Grameen loans money for self-employment to over 5 million poor women in Bangladesh.
You cannot get a dollar without a dollar in your hand. In the poor people, nobody gives the first dollar to catch the next dollar.
Dr. Yunus designed Grameen to serve people who have no collateral. 5 borrowers form a group and review each other's loans. The repayment rate is greater than 98%. More than half of Grameen's members have moved their families out of poverty.
We have demonstrated beyond anybody's doubt that it works and is sustainable, and it can work in all kinds of cultural and economic situations.
Grameen Bank has become a model for hundreds of microfinance programs around the world, serving tens of millions of the world's poorest citizens. In this program, Dr. Yunus shares the experience and insights gained in his struggle to build the world's leading poor people's bank.
I toyed around several alternatives. Finally, I decided maybe I should link them with the local bank. Bank is the one who should be lending money. This is their business. This is their job. So with enthusiasm, I go to the branch manager or the bank manager who is located in the campus, propose to him that he lend money to the poor people in the village. He fell from the sky. He couldn't believe I even said that. He said, no, it can't be done. It can't be done. I said, why not? Because, he said, poor people are not creditworthy. What does creditworthy mean? Creditworthy means he will not be able to pay back. I said, how do you know? Did you lend them at all? He said, no, I never lent them. How do you know? He said, everybody knows that. Because they are poor, no matter how much money you give, they will eat and the money will be over. They can't pay you back. So I went to higher officials in the city, downtown. I talked to them. They said the same thing. So every time I go and see somebody, they tell me the same thing. And it went on for months. I couldn't find the door to open. Then I learned something from them and I used it. I said, why don't you accept me as a guarantor? I become your guarantor. I sign all your documents. Risk is on me, not on you. You give the money. I thought it's such a straightforward proposal, they will immediately go for it. They didn't. In all, there were more than 6 months. Finally, I was accepted as a guarantor. And it worked. I was very excited that it worked. But the bank manager doesn't change his mind. He said it may work in one village, but if you do it in 2 villages, it will never work. I said, okay, let me do it in 2 villages. So I did it in 2 villages, it worked. He said, well, 1 village and 2 villages are the same thing. Maybe you should do it in 5 villages. So I did it in 5 villages. It worked. But he doesn't change his mind. After I have done this several rounds, and I realized that if I do the whole world, he's not going to change his mind. Maybe I should forget about him. So I thought maybe I should have a separate bank doing exactly what I'm doing. And that idea started haunting me. That why don't I have a bank for the poor people?
Is a better world possible? The challenges sometimes seem overwhelming. Billions of people have no access to education, health care, clean drinking water, or even basic human rights. Their poverty is compounded by corruption, conflict over resources, economic stagnation, and violence.
Some countries, whole generations of young people are being lost.
So the cycle goes on and on. So one has to break that cycle.
Where are the solutions? And who are the change makers who can create them? In the past few decades, a powerful force has emerged. New leaders finding new ways to tackle the world's biggest problems. Problems that governments and businesses alone have not been able to overcome.
This is a new language, a new way of looking at the world.
Very different structure, different framework, different reference points.
This global revolution is led by social entrepreneurs, innovative people who respond to local problems, engage their communities in solving them, and accelerate change.
What has happened during the last 5 years is breathtaking.
People have the power of transformation.
This series is an opportunity to learn from the most extraordinary social entrepreneurs, people whose visionary ideas and persistence have enabled millions to transform their own lives. These founding members of Ashoka's Global Academy for Social Entrepreneurship have lessons to offer us all about the power of our own potential. They all started small, from humble beginnings. You are invited to share their journeys, learn their insights, and about the tools they use to produce change.
We have a window of opportunity of a couple of
This is
years.
the chance that we have to think
The
ahead.
companies that get this are going to have a huge competitive advantage.
Whether you're in business, the media, government, universities, or the social sector, this series will expose you to a new way of thinking and working that will stretch your own beliefs about what's possible and how you can achieve it. Is a better world possible? The challenges sometimes seem overwhelming. Billions of people have no access to education, health care, clean drinking water, or even basic human rights. Their poverty is compounded by corruption, conflict over resources, economic stagnation, and violence.
Some countries, whole generations of young people are being lost.
So the cycle goes on and on. So one has to break that cycle.
Where are the solutions? And who are the change makers who can create them? In the past few decades, a powerful force has emerged. New leaders finding new ways to tackle the world's biggest problems. Problems that governments and businesses alone have not been able to overcome.
This is a new language, a new way of looking at the world.
Very different structure, different framework, different reference points.
This global revolution is led by social entrepreneurs, innovative people who respond to local problems, engage their communities in solving them, and accelerate change.
What has happened during the last 5 years is breathtaking.
People have the power of transformation.
This series is an opportunity to learn from the most extraordinary social entrepreneurs, people whose visionary ideas and persistence have enabled millions to transform their own lives. These founding members of Ashoka's Global Academy for Social Entrepreneurship have lessons to offer us all about the power of our own potential. They all started small, from humble beginnings. You are invited to share their journeys, learn their insights, and about the tools they use to produce change.
We have a window of opportunity of a couple of
This is the
years.
chance that we have to think
The
ahead.
companies that get this are going to have a huge competitive advantage.
Whether you're in business, the media, government, universities, or the social sector, this series will expose you to a new way of thinking and working that will stretch your own beliefs about what's possible and how you can achieve it.